this video, I'm going to show you how to work with your cyanotypes. The one on the left is a very clean cyanotype that there was no movement of the material, there's no shadowing, everything was really flat, and it was scanned in, as opposed to the one on the right where it's just a photograph and the actual cyanotype is not as crisp. So we're going to do two different versions and see how to work with them. So on the left, I'm just going to show you the image size is 300 dpi, and it's the original size because it's a scan. So I scanned it at 300 dpi so I have as much quality as I need, and I saved it as a JPEG or a Photoshop file is fine. On the right, because it's a photograph, the image size is only 72 dpi, which is what the default for your iPhone camera is. And what it does to make up for the fact that it's got such a low DPI is, which is dots per inch, is it makes it a very big image. So I think we know this is not 42 inches wide because the paper is 5 inches by 7 inches. So how you approach working with them will be to first make sure your image size and your resolution are correct. So this one on the right, I'm going to change the image size and resolution, and I'm also going to have it resample the image, and I'm changing this from nearest neighbor to automatic because nearest neighbor doesn't add any other pixels. It's going to be kind of chewed up looking because it just works with what it has, whereas automatic is going to give a little bit of smoothing to the image as it drastically changes scale and resolution. So I'm going to go up to 300, and then I'm going to do 5 inches wide, and it's going to end up being at about 7 inches tall. Before I do that, perhaps you've already noticed that I haven't cropped it. So if I make these changes without cropping it down to the size of the paper, then it's actually going to be too small. So before I do that, I'm going to go out and I'm going to use the crop tool. If I hit C on my keyboard, the crop tool will appear, or you can find it on the left-hand toolbar over here. So I'm going to crop away anything I don't need. You can also see that because it's a photograph, it ended up using the curve of the paper instead of flattening it. So I'm going to move that over, and then I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard to crop that away. So now if I go in and say image size 300 dpi and the width is 5 inches, it will scale down to the actual size, but the quality is never going to be the same as the left where it was a scan. And that's why I'm asking you to scan your images. So now we have two images at the correct scale and the correct resolution that we can work with. So I'm going to save this as photo cropped. So if I lose it, I can come back to it. And I'm going to show you how to work with the one on the left so that you can be encouraged to work with a clearer cyanotype that has been scanned. So I'm going to minimize this one for now and come back to it. So with this image, it's going to be really easy to pick the motif up off the ground. When I'm designing with a cyanotype, I don't really want to design with the ground color. I want to design with the motif color. So instead of working with white on blue, I'm going to invert it so it's working with black on white, which is closer to what the screen print image will look like before we burn the screen. So to do that, I'm going to go image, adjust, desaturate, and that's going to pull all the color out. And it's quite gray compared to what I would love it to be, which is black and white. So I'm going to now adjust the levels, and in adjusting the levels, it's going to make the background black and the foreground white with a little bit of variation here that we can clean up. So I want to take this triangle on the left-hand side that represents black and bring it over to this information which represents where the information is in the image. So I'm basically saying anywhere it's on the darker side, let's make it an actual black. And I got lucky here. I get all the way over, and it really actually looks quite good, and only a few things to clean up. So now I'm going to invert image, adjust, invert the image so it's a black mark on a white ground. I just find this easier to work with. So once I've done that, I'm going to actually select the motif off the ground so I can move it around in the layout. So I'm going to use the selection tool here, the magic wand tool. I'm going to make sure anti-alias is off up here because that blurs things. And I'm going to make sure contiguous is off because that's only going to make the selections where I click until it runs out of the black. So I want to make sure it takes the black everywhere. So no contiguous. And then the tolerance, you might want to change it if you don't have a truly black and white image. You might want to play with a higher tolerance so that it selects some of the grays. I think I'm just going to put it at a low tolerance and let it select just the blacks. If I zoom in, I may have missed out on some of the grays, but to be honest, I don't think it's going to make a difference. Let me undo that and show you what a higher tolerance would do. That actually selected more of the blacker grays, so I'll stick with that. The next thing I'm going to do is pull this entire thing off its background. So the fastest way to do that with a selection is say new, layer, via cut. So it's going to cut it off the background, and you can see over here that it put it on its own layer. It did leave some of the random stuff on the ground layer, so before I move on, I can either throw out that layer or I can go to that layer and select all and then clear it, and it's going to use whatever color is in the background here, and if it isn't the color I want, I can click on it and change it here. Okay, so now I would deselect, and I have my motif floating on the layer so that I can move it around, and you'll notice that there's some areas that I don't really need, and I could select those with a lasso and hit delete on my keyboard, so like that, hit delete, and then I can deselect. If I did need to clean it up, I would do that. I'm going to show you on the other artwork how to clean it up a little bit. So I'm going to save this as scan clean. What? Scanned clean so that I can work with it. Saving it as a Photoshop file to keep all the layer information. And the next thing I'm going to do is make my canvas size 20 by 20. So 20 by 20, I'm hoping that fits on the screens. Otherwise, we might have to scale down slightly to 19, but let's work with 20 by 20. And you can see that the scale of my cyanotype in 20 by 20 is actually pretty small. I think I would not go any smaller than this for the line quality. And of course, there's many ways I could design with this. I could, keep it the size and do some tossed layout type of thing. There's another video that shows you how to actually design. So I'm not going to get into that too much, but just a quick note that if you want to rescale this, you can rescale it. Remember, I was talking about the nearest neighbor option. If you want to keep the crispness that we have now, you would change it to nearest neighbor, because that will do is it will not bring in any like fuzzy grayness around the edges. It just keeps what it had. If you don't use that, it sometimes blurs it because it thinks it's helping. All right, so that's the end of part one. And actually, maybe I'll type end of part one here, so if you're using the video, you can find it. End of part one, working with a clean scan. Okay. So part two is going to be working with the other file. So I'm going to go to Window and pull up the cropped photo and work with this one now. And I'll make the other one minimized. Sorry, a little messy there. So photo cropped is here. So with this one, I'm going to have to approach it a little differently, because even if it was scanned, if your cyanotype has this like movement or shadow effect in it, it's going to be a different process to work with it. So There's two choices I have to make here. One is, do I like that? I want to somehow try to turn it into my design, or do I not like it and I want to go in and clean up? So if I don't like it, I want to go and clean up. I'm going to have to do some hand selection and deleting, and possibly some drawing to actually get the image. So I'm going to zoom in and show you what I mean by that. Like if I don't want two colors here, I would be able to go in with this color and the lasso and go into the areas that I want to make the same color, select them, and edit fill with the foreground color here. There are keyboard shortcuts if you want to use those, but this is how I would manually clean up the artwork. There's also the option of going in and drawing with a pen to do that, or there's a third option, which could be before you even scan it, you could use a piece of tracing paper and hand draw over it. So I'm going to leave that up to you to figure out if you wanted to fix the cyanotype. But if you're happy with the cyanotype as it is and want to see what you can do with that tonal effect, I'm going to move forward from here. So we definitely want to clean up what's going on here where the glass is or where my clamp was. But before we do that, we do want to take the artwork off the background. So I'm going to do the same thing I did in the first half of the video, and go to Image, Adjust, Desaturate. And then I'm going to do Image, Adjust, Levels. And I'm going to bring the levels up. And you'll see it's much harder to just get a quick black and white here. So I'm just going to get as close as I can get and assume that I still have to hand clean a few areas. You can see this. I'm going to get it to this point. And then I'm going to Image, Adjust, Invert, so I can be working with dark on light because that's my preference. So now I would use the lasso tool or the pen tool or the brush tool to draw away the stuff that I don't want in the background. And I prefer the lasso tool, but right now I'm showing you the pencil tool. The lasso tool allows me to do really detailed selections, so I can just basically draw around it. And you'll see that there's a plus symbol next to it because I've activated the additive option up at the top. And once I have a selection, and then I would edit, fill, or use the keyboard shortcuts to hit clear. So I'm going to do a very quick, oh my goodness. I'm going to do a very quick version of this. I don't know if you just saw the screen flip, but back at it. Okay, so if I was doing this for my real design, I would be spending a lot of time making sure I got all of the stuff out of the background. But for the demo, I'm just going to try and keep it quick. So now I'm going to say edit, fill with the foreground color, which is white, and then deselect. So now I have some artwork that I can work with and that I can pull onto its own layer. Before I do that though, I'm going to actually do something called bit mapping. Now bit mapping is going to turn this into a dot pattern instead of a grayscale. You could bitmap at the very end after you do your layout, or you could bitmap at the beginning and then clean that up again at the end. But in either case, I'm going to show you how to bitmap. So adjust levels again, just to make sure I'm getting as crisp of a dark as I can, and then the rest can be a little bit lighter. So image mode, first you have to go to grayscale. And then you have to go to bitmap. And now the bitmap settings are important because our file is 300 dpi. That should default to that. We do want to use a halftone screen. We don't want to use anything complicated. Halftone screen. And then we want to make sure it's set to a line frequency of 22 or less, because that is what we can burn with our facilities. So I'm going to go down to 15 to show you. And that means it's going to be 15 round dots per inch, and it's going to make a pattern of dots to make up that artwork. And you can see what happened there. So I did 15 to show you what lower would look like. Now I'm going to do 22. You can see how it's a little bit better. I don't know if you noticed this, but the areas that aren't totally black here also got toned out. So you can also go in and make sure black stays black so it doesn't get hit by the bit mapping. But I kind of like that. You'll have to decide based on your own design. When I'm working with this is going to get a little bit chewed up. So meaning as you rotate it, things can get chewed up. So I would probably wait until the end to do the bit mapping. But once you have the bit mapping, you can actually just select the artwork, but you have to turn it back into, I don't like working in grayscale. First you go to grayscale, you turn it back into an RGB color so that you can then play with color. So I'm going to use the magic wand. Contiguous is off. Tolerance could be at 0 because it's actually black and white, but 100 is fine. And select, layer, new layer via cut, and you're going to see that it is totally cut out of the background. I can make my canvas size 20 by 20 and go ahead and work with the motif. So I'm going to show you, if I'm working with the motif and scaling it, how it's going to affect the bitmap. So, or if I'm rotating it. So I'm doing Command T on my keyboard just to do a shortcut for rotating. So I'm rotating it here, and you'll see that it's set to nearest neighbor, which means it won't add any more colors. I'm going to do 2 versions so you can compare them. This would be for rotating it or rescaling it. So the first one, I'm going to do a rotation on nearest neighbor. And the second one, I'm going to do a rotation on automatic, just so you can see the difference, the quality of it. So let's get up here very close so you can see them side by side. So the one on the left is just staying as 2 colors, and the one on the right is adding extra colors to try to make up for the rotation. We do not need to worry if it's in this condition, but if you rotate things multiple times, it's going to start getting very, very blurry. So when you actually burn your screen, you're going to lose a lot of information, or you're going to have a lot of unpredictable results of that. So I recommend either using nearest neighbor or just checking in and then going back to adjusting the levels, so you can make sure you know what you're going to get. And again, the other videos will show you more about layout, but hopefully this is helping you understand how to work with the actual cyanotype.